Have you ever wondered why a man becomes haunted by the one who never begged, never fought, never looked back? Not the one who screamed, not the one who chased, but the one who left with quiet eyes and an unshaken spine. She is the one who takes root in his unconscious, years after her footsteps have faded. Somewhere inside him she still walks, wordless and untouchable. This is the woman Edgar Cayce warned us about. The soul mirror, the karmic teacher, the feminine energy that arrives not to be possessed, but to awaken. She doesn't explode. She evaporates. And yet, her absence screams louder than any voice he's ever known. A man doesn't truly miss a woman until he meets the one who touches him beyond flesh, the one who sees through his performance into the fracture beneath the pride, the one who senses his unhealed boyhood behind his charisma, the one who doesn't need his validation to feel alive. She watched the mask, but loved the shadow behind it. And that terrified him, because the feminine doesn't chase what is not rising. And the man still tied to ego, still hiding in performance and conquest, cannot hold her. He may attract her. He may even seduce her, but he will not keep her. She is the quiet undoing of his false self. And when she walks away, silently, without drama, it punctures something deep inside him. A soft ego death, a spiritual confrontation. His soul begins to ache in a way he cannot explain, and no one around him will understand. He'll tell himself he's fine, that she was just another chapter, another name, another moment. But years later, during a mundane morning or in the stillness of 2 a.m., she will flicker through his memory like a ghost that never fully died. Her energy, detached but not cruel, will seep into his thoughts when he least expects it. Why? Because the soul recognizes power, especially the kind that does not beg to be seen. She was not perfect, but she was rare. And the rarest women are not the loudest. They are the ones who disappear without a trace, but leave a silence that echoes. He may even see her again, dressed in calm, her life unfolding without him. And that sight will sting more than any argument ever could. Because she didn't try to prove her worth, she embodied it. In the eyes of the spiritually blind, she was too much. But to the man who was still at war with himself, she was everything he wanted and nothing he was ready for. Cayce often said that some women are placed into a man's life not to fulfill desire, but to ignite growth. They are not here to stay. They are here to disrupt, to show him the parts of himself he has buried beneath charm, ambition, and distraction. And when she walks away, the lesson begins. At first, he thinks it's her absence that tortures him. But what he's actually mourning is the version of himself he couldn't rise into when she stood beside him. He remembers her silence, not because it was cold, but because it was sacred. It was the silence of a woman who had already chosen herself. And nothing disturbs a man more than a woman who is no longer emotionally available to his indecision. She was not punishing him. She was simply done auditioning for a role she never needed to play. And still he replays her. Obsession doesn't begin with desire. It begins with a rupture in the ego. The rupture comes when a man realizes he lost something he thought would always be there. He assumed she would wait, that her compassion would make her stay, that her love would keep her bound to him while he toyed with his own confusion. But the sacred feminine is patient, not passive. She feels deeply, but she will not bleed endlessly for someone who does not rise to meet her. She gives many chances until she gives none. And when she leaves, it is without malice. That's what cuts the deepest. No anger, no outburst, just silence. And in that silence, the man begins to spiral, not outwardly, but inwardly. His mind races. His ego flails. His soul whispers. He becomes obsessed not with her, but with the version of himself he was too afraid to become when he had her. This is shadow work in motion. The woman who walks away silently is not running from him. She is returning to herself. She knows her energy is sacred. She knows that emotional access is earned, not owed. And she understands that some men only awaken after losing what they could not understand. To the untrained eye, she vanished. But spiritually, she left a mirror. And in that mirror, he now sees everything he refused to face: his avoidance, his games, his unhealed trauma, his fear of being seen. This is not punishment. It is initiation. A man does not obsess over what is ordinary. He obsesses over what touched the soul without trying. And this kind of feminine power, it doesn't scream. It whispers, then it leaves. The echo is what he hears every time he tries to recreate her with someone else. But energy doesn't lie. He can mimic the circumstances, the settings, even the gestures, but not the soul imprint. She was not just a woman. She was a mirror, a trigger, a lesson wrapped in softness. And that lesson still lingers in his unconscious, waiting for him to face it. He walks through his life now, perhaps successful, perhaps loved, perhaps surrounded. But something feels incomplete. Something in him still reaches toward a void he cannot define. He may not admit it out loud, but the truth aches silently beneath every relationship he enters. He tries to replace her. He tries to overwrite the memory. But the soul does not forget initiations. And that is what she was. Not a mistake. Not a fantasy. An initiation. Into truth. Into depth. Into the parts of himself he abandoned to survive in the world of men. She was different because she did not seek to impress him. She sought only to witness him. And that kind of presence is uncomfortable to a man still living inside performance. A man who mistakes being admired for being known. He still sees her in dreams, not always vividly. Sometimes it's just the echo of her laugh, or the calm way she used to sit in silence with him without needing to fill it. Sometimes it's the piercing image of her back as she walked away, not in anger, but in liberation. And in those moments, something inside him crumbles. Because this isn't just about losing a woman. This is about losing access to a part of himself that only she could reach, that only she could reflect. There's a particular grief that comes with the one who left silently. It's not the grief of betrayal, not the drama of a fight. It's the ache of recognition. The moment his soul realizes it was given a glimpse of something sacred, and he was not yet ready to hold it. So now he obsesses. But not in the way people think. His obsession is subtle. It lives in his rituals, in his quiet moments, in the way he scans the crowd for a face that will never appear, in the way he avoids eye contact with new lovers, because none of them meet him at the depth she did. It is an obsession not with possession, but with the mystery of why she stayed calm, the mystery of why she never returned, the mystery of why she didn't try to convince him. It tortures him because no woman had ever refused to explain her silence before. No woman had walked away with that kind of grace and certainty. And now he wonders, what did she see in him that he couldn't see himself? Why did she choose him in the first place? And why did she leave just as he thought he had her? This is the beginning of shadow awakening. According to Jung, the shadow is everything a person refuses to see about themselves. And this woman, this radiant, intuitive, emotionally sovereign woman, brought his shadow to light. Not through confrontation, but through reflection. She reflected his incapacity to hold what is real. His fear of being loved for who he truly is, not who he pretends to be. She felt his avoidance in her body. She read it in the pauses, in the way he deflected intimacy with charm, in the way he smiled to cover silence, in the way he complimented her without ever asking real questions. And so she left, because she no longer had the energy to keep loving someone who wouldn't meet her halfway into the mirror. Her silence was not passive, it was powerful. A protest without words, a detachment forged not in coldness, but in wisdom. She had learned, perhaps painfully, that the masculine often awakens only through loss. And now, it is happening. He sees her in the women he ignores. He hears her voice in songs he used to skip. He smells her presence in places they never even went together. Because obsession is not always conscious, it is sometimes cellular. And it is in those cells that her memory now resides. He doesn't talk about her. Not to his friends. Not to his lovers. Not even to himself. But she is there, lingering in the gaps between his thoughts, living in the cracks of his confidence. Not because she cursed him, but because she cracked him open. She was the soul storm, the beautiful rupture, the graceful goodbye that forced him to confront the life he'd built on half-truths. He tries to move forward. He convinces himself he's healed, that he's fine, that she was simply too intense, too emotional, too much. But that voice only echoes louder in his weakest moments. You weren't too much. You were just more than he was ready to receive. And she knew it. She knew that if she stayed, she would shrink. So she walked. With grace. With power. With devastating stillness. And now, he is left to wrestle with the ghost of his own incompletion. This is the feminine power Edgar Cayce alluded to, an energy that does not conquer, but awakens. Not through war, through presence. And when that presence is gone, a man is left to reckon with the emptiness he once mistook for freedom. There's a moment in every man's life when he stops chasing women and starts chasing peace. And for some, that moment only arrives after he has lost the woman who embodied it. She was not peace in the form of passivity. She was peace through power, through presence, through discernment. And the greatest feminine mystery is this: she did not leave to punish him. She left to protect the energy he mistook for permanence. She left because Ting would have meant becoming someone she no longer recognized. She left because her soul was no longer being nourished, only drained. To the outside world, she vanished. Quietly, without explanation. But spiritually, she ascended. She stepped back into alignment with herself. And this is what few understand. Detachment is not always a rejection. Sometimes it is a sacred return. What he thought was silence was actually the most powerful act of love she had left to give, to herself. Now he lives in the shadows of almost. The parallel timeline where he could have become the man who met her there. But timelines collapse when action is delayed. Feminine energy cannot remain frozen, waiting for permission to thrive. She gave signs. She spoke in the language of patience. She gave grace after grace. But when the moment arrived, she moved, not with violence, but with divine certainty. This certainty is what drives him mad. Not because it hurts his heart, but because it bruises his ego. She didn't ask for closure. She didn't beg for attention. She didn't spiral into rage. She simply left. And in doing so, she became unforgettable. Not because of what she did, but because of what she didn't do. There was no revenge. No smear campaign. No final plea. She didn't try to win him. She reclaimed herself. That is the purest, rawest expression of feminine power, sovereign detachment. The kind that shakes a man not through chaos, but through clarity. Cayce once described the soul as a traveler, constantly revisiting unfinished contracts, meeting the echoes of past life decisions in present-day relationships. And this woman, she didn't come into his life randomly. She came to reflect the version of himself he was too afraid to become. And so she became a haunting. Not a torment, a sacred ghost. The one whose memory doesn't age. The one whose name cannot be spoken without pause. The one who never tried to own him, only reveal him. He remembers her eyes most of all. Not for their beauty, but for their knowing. She knew, and that terrified him. Knew when he was pretending. Knew when he was shrinking. Knew when his words didn't match his vibration. And she never tried to fix it. She simply observed quietly. And left, gracefully. Because feminine maturity is not loud. It is deeply intuitive. It doesn't force change, it invites it. And if the invitation is ignored, it disappears. But make no mistake, she did not forget him. She simply chose not to carry him. She chose to transmute her pain into wisdom, her disappointment into art, her grief into freedom. He became a page in her story, while she became a chapter in his soul. He may not say it. He may not show it. But he knows, deep in the marrow of his being, that he was witnessed by something rare. And nothing can unsee you once you've been seen by a woman in her full feminine essence. Not a woman who wanted to possess you, but one who saw you and your shadow and loved you anyway. And still walked away. This is not about punishment. This is about prophecy. Cayce warned us that some connections arrive not for companionship, but for awakening. And what awakens us most is not being loved. It is realizing we were loved in a way we couldn't yet receive. The tragedy is not that she left. The tragedy is that he now understands what she was after she's gone. And even if she returned, she would no longer recognize herself in the space he once offered. Because she is no longer that version of herself. She has transformed. And that's what he can't stop thinking about. He obsesses because he senses the truth. The woman who walked away has become someone his old self can no longer access. And maybe, just maybe, that's the most painful part of all. Because obsession isn't always about desire. Sometimes it's the soul grieving its own missed opportunity. He thought time would fade her, that the seasons would dilute the memory, that new hands, new lips, new bodies would overwrite the resonance of hers. But time has a cruel sense of clarity. It reveals, with brutal patience, what was real and what was replaceable. She wasn't just a woman. She was an event in his soul, a turning point, a reckoning. The one who stood before him not with demands, but with a mirror. And he ran, not with his feet, but with his avoidance. He ran through half-hearted connections, through ego-driven choices, through distractions dressed as romance. But what Cayce hinted at, and what the unconscious never forgets, is that some soul contracts remain open until they're faced. And this woman? She was that contract. Not to fulfill his fantasy, but to collapse it. She was not his forever. She was his threshold. And what terrifies him most now is this. He knows he will never feel that again. Not because love doesn't exist, but because he is no longer capable of receiving her frequency. Not as he is. He would have to break, die, rebuild. Not for her, but for himself. That is the final, terrifying gift she left behind. The call to become. And yet, he stalls. Because the climb into selfhood is steep, and the ghost of comfort is loud. So he loops, through memory, through regret, through imagined futures where he finally chose her, held her, matched her. But those futures never come, because she no longer waits. The woman who once loved him deeply, madly, quietly, now loves herself more. And that is what breaks him. She no longer reacts. She no longer aches. She no longer checks if he's watching. Because her silence is no longer a wound. It's a boundary. She has transmuted everything. The longing, the confusion, the ache of almost. It's all been woven into her strength, into her glow, into the aura that now draws in men she once never believed existed. Men who speak from the soul. Men who stand, not perform. Men who are not terrified by her depth, but drawn to it. She no longer flinches at the thought of him. She no longer wonders what could have been. Because she knows. Some men are not meant to stay. They're meant to break you open, so you can meet yourself. And in truth, she was his mirror, but he was her awakening too. She realized, through the ache of his absence, that the love she gave was never lost. It simply returned home. And now she walks with it, not in bitterness, but in quiet radiance. She carries herself like a woman who has died and been reborn through her own tears, no longer needing closure, no longer seeking apology, no longer asking why. Because the woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.